Oregon powered its way through the 2024 regular season, winning the Big Ten championship along the way before getting hit with a dose of reality in the college football playoffs. It was a brutal loss to the eventual national champs, but Dan Lanning says the sting is still there as the Ducks prepare for another big year in the sport's biggest conference. Now, Lanning has led Oregon to a 35-6 record over 3 seasons, in Eugene, and the offense has been clicking behind offensive coordinator Will Stein. Last year, they did it with Dylan Gabriel behind center. A long and strong line of QBs have helped bring Oregon back to the top of the college football world, as you see the numbers there. But will that be the case in 2025? Let's talk with our Richard Johnson as we take a look at a lot of storylines that are going to be important as the 2025 season gets underway. Richard, let's start in Oregon because we hear the word revenge tour thrown around a lot. They had a good season until they met Ohio State in the college football playoffs. Is that sting enough to cause a revenge tour in Oregon?
Haley, quack, quack, quack. I do think that it is. For me, Oregon is one of my two favorites to not only just make the college football playoff as a top seed, but national championship favorites. Consider what they brought in the transfer portal. Mekhi Hughes, running back from Tulane, who's a good player. Isaiah World, who is a left tackle, who they brought in from Nevada, who I think is going to be one of the first left tackles taken next year in the NFL draft. He's a great player. They are going to take the pressure off Dante Moore, who comes in as a starting quarterback. Now, Evan Stewart at wide receiver being out for a significant time, perhaps the whole season, is not great for them, but DeCorian Moore is a freshman wide receiver they are absolutely juiced about out in Eugene. And on the defensive side of the ball, Bear Alexander, who they've brought in, who they're familiar with, that coaching staff is from Georgia. If they can get the best out of him, I think they'll be solid on the defensive interior. And then Dylan Thieneman, who is a Purdue defensive back that they brought in the transfer portal, probably the best player in the portal of any player, offense or defense, last year. I think Oregon is loaded up the right way. They already had a really good roster from high school recruiting, and they just augmented it with transfer portal pieces. That's how you build a champion the right way through the portal. I think Oregon is locked and loaded for a massive season.
Okay, they get a quack quack from our Richard Johnson. They're going to open up the season against FCS powerhouse Montana State. We are excited for that one. Let's stay in the conference and talk about Iowa. The Hawkeyes have been led by Kirk Ferentz for 27 years at this point. He's the longest tenured active head coach. But there hasn't, Richard, really been a lot of success for Iowa. They've had the 12 straight winning seasons, but no real trophies to show for it. So when you think about the future of Kirk Ferentz, how are you feeling?
Haley, for me, Iowa is the model of consistency. And the great question for me when USC and Oregon and Washington and UCLA joined the Big Ten was, could Iowa maintain its perch in the Big Ten? Not ever really going to be the best or most talented team in the Big Ten, but because of their consistency and their development, they could be right there pushing for the Big Ten championship. Obviously, you've seen them beat Ohio State and compete with Michigan and compete with Penn State. But when they got rid of divisions in the Big Ten and it became kind of this round-robin schedule, so to speak, could Iowa hang? And they have been the model of consistency, I feel, in this league. Now, again, as we have up there, they have struggled against AP-ranked teams. But this year, I think Iowa has changed it up. They bring in Mark Gronowski, South Dakota State transfer quarterback. He won the FCS Heisman and was an under-the-radar NFL draft darling. He had an injury concern, an arm injury that they went in and they cleaned up with surgery in the spring. So he should be at full go this training camp. He brings a mobile aspect to his game. It's not just his arm, and I think that is huge for them to get +1 in the run game. Kamari Moulton is the next one up for them at running back after Caleb Johnson went to the NFL draft. And they are all behind a solid Iowa offensive line. We know the game up front for the Hawkeyes. They have 2 all-Big Ten players on the offensive line. And so for me, I think you have an extra dimension in the run game from Iowa. They will just continue to be able to play their ball control, boa constrictor offense, shorten games, play great defense with a Phil Parker coached unit, and get back to basics for the Hawkeyes.
It was so fun last year to see the Hawkeyes actually scoring touchdowns to win games, not just kicking field goals or settling for the messy win there. So we'll see if they can take that next step. Another team we're waiting to see if they can take that next step, of course, is Penn State. State. And Richard, I have heard so much hype in our building alone about this is the year for Penn State and James Franklin. And it just stinks that it's always the conversation because he's had such success there as well. But in your mind, is this the now or never season for Penn State?
I think last year was big for Penn State to be not just in the conversation, but to get close, right? You get to a semifinal game, you had a chance to win that game right until the very end. So now you change gears to this season. For me, what was holding Penn State back last year was the wide receiver corps, which to me is a little wild because James Franklin is a wide receiver coach by trade from back in the day. So the wide receiver room not giving them what they needed, I didn't think was very good. And so what they did, they went into the portal. Kyron Hudson comes in, Devontae Ross, Trevor Pena, 3 transfer wide receivers that they brought in. They are overhauling that entire room. Watch out for Kobe Howard as well. He's a freshman slot receiver that I think is getting rave reviews in camp at State College. And so for me, Penn State, you help Drew Aller out at quarterback with better wide receivers. We know what they have with Katron Allen and Nick Singleton at running back. I think this offense is going to be humming for Penn State. And I really think that you pair that with a defense that I think is going to be as good as it's been the last few years. And Dennis Sutton really steps in as the big guy up front for Penn State. And I think with a better offense, Penn State can get where it wants to go. I think Penn State should be in the Big Ten championship game. And I think Penn State should be pushing for a top 4 seed in the college football playoff in that bye.
Listen, Drew Aller, one of the most consistent, one of the most accurate quarterbacks. If he can't get it done, I don't know. We'll revisit this conversation next year, maybe with Penn State. I want to get to some news, though, that just came out this morning, Richard, in regards to Texas quarterback Archie Manning. It seems like we have just placed the world on his shoulders already. And now you have his legendary grandfather, Archie Manning, coming out and telling a local Texas newspaper that do not think about tanking for Arch next year because he is going to return to school in 2026. We've seen this tactic before, right? We just saw it last season with Shedeur Sanders and Deion Sanders and how that works. What do you make of the conversation with Archie saying Arch is coming back in 2026, and do you believe him?
Well, first of all, this has been the message, I think, from people at Texas, and now obviously you're hearing it from the Manning family. Do not tank for us. I was speaking to an NFC executive just the other day and kind of asking him what he thought about whether Arch will go back to school or whether he expects Arch to come out in this next upcoming NFL draft. And he was basically saying that he thinks it's a scare tactic. He thinks they are trying to actually steer the draft. Again, by the way, obviously did Archie for his son Eli Manning back when it was a situation that they did not want the Chargers to take Eli Manning because they didn't want him to be a Charger. And so now Archie is doing it for his grandson Arch here. I think it's fascinating the way they're trying to go about this. This is significantly different from Deion Sanders and Shedeur because I think Arch is actually better than Shedeur. Obviously, we saw Shedeur fall in the NFL draft. We saw that he was not good enough to try to manipulate the NFL draft. But to me, consider what potentially could be sitting there at the #1 pick. The New Orleans Saints, who Archie Manning played for in the NFL and never was able to get off the ground after an illustrious college career at Ole Miss because the Saints were such a mess back in the day. They are from New Orleans, is that family. There's going to be a lot of hype about the Saints tanking for Archie and getting the #1 pick. And Archie is trying to send a message and set the tone right now. Do not tank for us because if you do, we won't come. We will see how that actually comes about if Arch stars this season.
Yeah, I'm reading the exact quote, and he said, Arch isn't going to do that. He told Texas Monthly. He said, quote, he will be at Texas. And shout out to us being a team here because I went recent with the Sanders and you went the obvious and took the family who's done this in the past to bring us up to speed. So obviously we're in sync when it comes to that. When you look at Texas, though, Richard, and Arch, we know he's going to be there this season leading the charge. What do you think? Is Texas the team to beat in the SEC with Arch Manning behind center?
I do believe Texas is indeed the team to beat. I expect Texas to win the SEC. Texas is one of my other national championship favorites other than Oregon. There are two things that are a little concerning for me. Obviously, they already have an offensive line injury up front, in front of Arch, and on the defensive line, I want to make sure Texas is good enough on the defensive interior. They brought in a whole host of transfers at the defensive tackle position. They're trying to figure out who they can be up front. That has been the strength of Texas's defense over the last few years, that defensive interior. As long as they get those two things right, they're good enough up front protecting Arch, and they're good enough up front on the defensive end, stopping the run and having a significant push interior, solid interior to the defensive line. I think Texas will be right there at the end of the season vying for a national championship.
Well, as producer Tully likes to remind us, they got to beat that team up in Columbus first before we can call them a true contender. They open the season against Ohio State. Richard, we're excited to have you on board. We'll see you on the sidelines this season as well, so we appreciate your time this morning. You guys at home can also find Richard Johnson on the CBS Sports College Football YouTube page. All of our analysis on there with great insight as the college football season inches closer and closer. You can scan that QR code on your screen to get subscribed right now.